In this section, what we're going to do is talk about drive. Now, typically, we think about driving a ball as kind of a continuous process of getting lined up and hitting through the ball, and there's this idea of kind of this linear path through the ball that we refer to as driving. Now, in that kind of an approach, we really are what we would call either steering the ball too much, pushing it too much, or if we add a whip quality to that motion, we're actually slapping the ball. So what exactly is the drive? And this is, I think, really critical to understand what the drive is, because ultimately everything comes down to this drive component, in my opinion, that we're actually, a stroke really has this drive quality to it. And I think it's the most defining aspect of every single stroke, that we drive the ball. We don't hit it, we don't slap it, we don't brush it, we don't pull off of it, but we drive the ball. So what is it? Well, that's the thing. It really is so fleeting and so tiny that it's almost you would think insignificant. But on the other hand, it really all comes down to that, because driving the ball only occurs when you're in contact with the ball. If you think of driving a car, it's really kind of steering an object towards a target. So this moment of driving, it doesn't happen prior to contact, it doesn't happen on your follow-through. It happens only in the moments of contact with the ball. Now, how you wind up and how you follow through, the wind up helps to determine the drive. The follow through is a reflection of the drive. So these things are important, they are significant. But the actual drive only occurs on the contact. So let's now talk about exactly what we're looking for in a proper drive of the ball. Now, the other incredibly important element of drive is my target. Because again, I'm only driving the ball when two things are happening. One is my racket's in contact with the ball. Number two, my racket's aligned to the target. That's the only moments when drive actually does occur. So these moments are really defined by how I come in and how I go out. That's going to affect the quality of that moment with the ball. In other words, if I come up extremely fast like this on a two-handed backhand like this, I may square up and have a moment of drive with the ball and the target, but it's influenced, of course, by how I come into it. In other words, if I come in very flat like this, I've done just the opposite. So what exactly am I looking for with that perfect drive? How I come in, how I square up at the moment of contact and the moment of drive. That's the moment of drive. And then how do I exit? What am I doing on that ball? Again, this has all to do with touch. All about maximizing the hold on the ball. We talked about that feeling of hold. We talked about how to create touch. Now, not every shot is the same. If the ball's coming slowly to me, the way I move in and out of the drive is going to be very different than if the ball's coming very fast at me. And likewise, if I'm just trying to play the ball back slowly, or even trying to take speed off of the ball, all of that's going to be very different than how I add speed. But again, the drive is really just these very, very brief moments that I'm actually in contact with the ball. And really what we want to do is get a sense of how to create those moments in the optimal way. And again, like I said, they're different for different shots. So when we talk about drive, it's very different on a volley than, let's say, on a topspin backhand or a serve. Very different. These drive components change, but we're trying to really always get the same result, and that is optimal hold on the ball. If I can hold the ball better, then I can direct the ball better. The other thing is I want to get optimal squaring up to my target. Right? So I want to get a tremendous sense of staying at the target, or being aware of that moment of squaring up to the target. This idea of the target is so deeply embedded in good players, and that is that everything they do is to really square up, is kind of geared and directed towards this moment of squaring onto the ball and to the target. Now, it may be a very brief moment, but it is extremely, extremely deeply kind of felt. It's really what drives the entire stroke, where lesser players are thinking about getting ready, they're thinking about their follow-through. Again, the better players come back to this kind of focus of squaring up to the ball and to the target. My ability to do that really defines the drive. So again, driving doesn't happen before the ball, it doesn't happen after the ball. All of these things have implications about the drive, but the actual drive happens right in the contact. So I like to really stress this idea of staying in the hit, staying in the contact. And we see this with great players in all sports, that their focus is in the contact. Right? And that's what we see when they keep their heads down and to the side as they're stroking, is that they're staying in the contact. And that again is a kind of a reinforcement of this idea that that drive, that moment of contact with the ball, with the target, is really the most important aspect of your entire stroke. Now, to talk about the drive in these very, very nuanced moments that we're trying to create, I'm going to use this, and many of you have probably seen me use this and talk about these aspects in the past, but I think they really bear repeating. And I think as we go over these things more and more and bring a little bit more experience and a little more information into it, it really changes what we're getting out of these discussions too. So stay with me and see if you can pick up some new elements. Now, when we look at just moving a ball forward and driving it, we'll see that most people think that this drive is going to occur by coming from straight behind the ball, finding a point, and pushing through the ball on a path to the target, basically going on a straight line. And so they come in like this, but what again it really does is creates a collision between the racket and the ball, and the ball just shoots away. Again, you may have some directionality with this, but remember, in tennis we also have to create this arc and trajectory control, and certainly as we start to add speed into this movement, that isn't going to work. And am I really getting better hold? Because remember, hold is really the key to driving the ball better. I can direct the ball better if I can hold it fractionally longer, and even if it's milliseconds more, a couple milliseconds, it makes an incredibly different feeling. Right? So I hear a lot of people say, well, you can only hold the ball for between 4 and 8 milliseconds. Well, I'll take the 8 milliseconds, thank you. You can have the 4 milliseconds. But what I'm going to feel in 8 milliseconds is going to be incredibly different than what you're going to feel, and what I can do with the ball is going to be infinitely better. So, again, let's try to get to those 8 milliseconds. All right, now, as we come in, what we're really going to try to do is push and turn. That's going to give me the optimal control and hold. So I'm taking a point and actually getting not just a push forward, but also a lift on that. So again, see, I'm getting better hold on this point by doing this versus that. And again, this idea of going through the ball, you know, of course, we can't go through the ball. It's not like the racket goes past the ball and the ball's left behind. So we're talking about something. When we say hit through the ball, we're talking about a certain kind of phenomena that we're after. How do we best describe that? And can we really attain it optimally by that kind of language, by saying hitting through the ball? Well, I think we can't. I think there are better ways of really getting the feeling that we're trying to get when we talk about hitting through the ball. And that's what we're looking at right now. So again, we'll see that there's a real vertical, or it can be downward as well as upward, and it can even be sideways. Even be side spin can give me. And in fact, we'll see that there's actually a combination of both side spins and vertical spins in the very top shots. All right, so what we see with people then is that they say, okay, well, swing from low to high. So they get back here, and they get behind the ball, and then they do something like that. And that's better, because now I'm kind of brushing up the ball. But there's another way that we see players going to, which is even better, and that is to coil into the ball. Now, this enhances the hold by the actions that we talked about before. This starts to implement coils and what we talked about before, throwing actions, whipping actions. So now I'm coming into the ball from a cocked position and getting a much more dynamic release, right? And so instead of just coming, forward and up, I actually kind of get a very full action. We call this ball shaping. And this again is where we feel both side spin and top spin, or in an underspin, same thing, side spin and underspin. So there's much more coverage, we say, much better hold. And this is all based upon another principle of leverage. This action of catching and throwing and cocking and releasing, all of this has to do with leverage. And it's all about working on a point from a very, very close proximity to that point, using a very efficient system of powering, what I called short power in previous courses. This is really what leverage is all about. And leverage is a very interesting subject, and we're going to talk a little bit more about leverage in this next section. So let's talk about this idea of leverage and really kind of what we mean by using a lever type of an action against the ball, because we do hear this, that they'll talk about, pros will talk about kind of levers. But what exactly is a lever? How does that function, and why is that useful in this application? Well, we can think of leverage like if you're just digging. If I just have a shovel and I'm digging in the ground, if I do it correctly, I use leverage. And what I do is I stick the end of the shovel into the dirt, and then I set my knee underneath the shovel, the handle of the shovel, and then I push down on the handle to make the blade of the shovel go up. And it's much more efficient. I get a lot more power rather than just trying to dig like this, put the shovel in and just lift the shovel up, trying to swing it around like this. And of course we get very tired if we don't do it the right way. It's a lot harder work, and it's a lot less efficient. It doesn't do as good a job. And so this is exactly what happens in our tennis stroke too, that great players learn how to leverage. They're not swinging, they're not thinking of racket head speed, they're thinking of connecting into the ball and creating a levered push and turn on the ball. And it's exactly like how we shovel and use levers in any other application. So what I am actually trying to do is kind of coil into the ball. Now remember, these coil actions, they have touch, they have hold, so it is like kind of locking into the ball with a coil and then levering by pushing from the big parts into the handle with almost opposite actions. So instead of everything just turning in, we talk about turning in. I think that's a complete misnomer. I think that it doesn't happen like that at all. I think what happens is we coil onto the ball, and there's a very complex lever action that actually pushes right into the ball. And it looks like we're turning in because what I'm actually doing is pulling back with this left hip to push my right hip right against the ball. And pulling back in other areas, I pull back the left shoulder, I kick back the right leg, and this creates a tremendous force being applied on the opposite end. I'm not trying to swing this end, I'm applying all this force on the non-hitting end, on the other end of the shovel, you could say. And that's what an efficient lever actually is. So again, we've got to think about how to increase touch and hold. And this is what a lever does. It's all based upon locking that end in against something, getting a secure hold at the end that I'm trying to eventually create movement at, but then applying the force on the opposite end. So again, I'm trying to lock in on the ball, create hold, create resistance, and lever on the handle end with very forceful movements coming more from the core of the body. This is exactly how we see good players play. Right? And when it happens, it looks so easy because it is incredibly efficient, and also it does create this dynamic drive, this moment, as opposed to, again, just kind of this swinging action. We see there's no definition there. There's no timing in that kind of a movement. But all of these things we're talking about, a whip, a lever, they're all based on points and focusing energy coming out of large core application or forceful movements that create a very passive but a very, very dynamic movement on the other end. So now what I want to introduce is a concept that we're all kind of familiar with, mainly in other sports, but I'm going to tell you how this is incredibly important in our tennis stroke as well, and that is the lag, or sometimes we call it a wag. Right? In golf, when you see a golfer stand up to hit, you'll see them kind of loose and shake their hips and then shake the arms a little bit and then wiggle the hands and so on. And basically they're trying to feel this kind of whip, just a slow, easy whip quality. And in these movements, there's active movements and passive movements. So the active movements are in the legs, just kind of settling into the legs, and then they just kind of loosen the back, kind of let all of those movements just kind of circulate through. It's that ripple of power we've talked about in previous courses. They just feel, again, kind of this soft movement. And we see the same thing in baseball. Baseball hitter will get up and kind of settle first into the balls of their feet with a few bounces. Then they'll feel a little back and forth action. And as they hit, again, they're doing the same thing. They'll feel their knees kind of back and forth, and then feel this loose kind of action as the elbows kind of go back and forth as well. Again, this ripple of power, but at this end, everything is loose, light as can be. So within this, again, we have movement that's, again, more active, where I put force into. And then there's also movement that's kind of very passive. It's just accepting that energy. If I just keep things relaxed, just like snapping a towel, or if I took a hose and just kind of shook one end, if the hose is relaxed, and so on, it'll just accept that energy. Well, if I get the body right and not stiff, it'll accept that energy also that I'm kind of shaking from down below. And what happens is, again, we have this very supple energy moving, kind of these cycles, that also has these lags, or there's kind of voids in these things. Well, one's kind of going backwards a little bit, you see, as it's kind of, again, meandering. Part of the movement goes backwards before it comes forward, and there's a softness in there. And if you time it right, again, there's actually kind of voids where I can catch something and actually have a touch, a hold in there. So this is really what we're trying to learn in trying to develop touch. And this is why we use the coils and the whip action. See, so that we can create touch. It takes timing. But it allows you to develop timing, because there is no timing the other way. All right, so, a player will throw a ball, baseball player, and they're doing exactly the same thing, right? And all of this comes out to a point of release. Boom. And there. All right, so all of these movements circulate out and release. Right, so same thing on our tennis stroke. They circulate out and keep the arm very soft, catch, boom, and drive. And as the final moment occurs, Again, there's a forceful straightening out from the inside motion. So if I'm hitting a baseball, I come in and I don't just straighten out like this, I straighten out like that. So I'm pushing back here. As I feel the very final moment of this straightening out, there's actually a reverse straightening out coming at the other end. This is the levering action. Again, we're applying a forceful push back to coincide with the passive straightening out at this end that creates this locking in kind of an action. Okay, and we see that very much on the serve. When you see a player kick back, you see the hip shoot back on the right side. We see the non-dominant hand, the hand that tosses, comes in and pushes the body backwards. So again, we have this levering action where we have very forceful motions actually going backwards against to create a release and be timed with a forward release that's very light, very passive, and very touch-oriented on this end. Okay, so again, very soft out on the ends, very much trying to catch the ball in voids, and try to apply force on the other end. Now this has really direct relevance to our drive. Okay, because remember, all of it focuses down into these correct moments of contact that we're looking at. And right on the contact itself, we're trying to create that squaring up where we really feel things lock into place and we feel the target. Okay, so this is again where the touch that we're trying to create, this connection with the ball, actually just merges. It becomes the drive itself. So these two things, the touch and the drive, actually are one in the same. It sounds paradoxical because touch sounds like I'm trying to hold the ball, drive sounds like I'm trying to send the ball away, but in reality, we're trying to do, those two things are one and the same because, again, we're looking at the wrong end. We're looking at this end. What we should be looking at is the body. And that is, I create the touch, and at the moment of touch, I should be at the target, and boom. And then the force is applied here, not something out here. This becomes a very passive straightening out that's very soft and has touch to it. And I apply a very strong movement from the larger muscle groups. So again, I wanted to tie all of these threads together of the whip action, the coiling action to the ball, touch, drive, leverage. All of these things are just threads that tie into the correct movement that happens right at the moment of contact. And they all come together perfectly and support each other if we can kind of break through the language and the models that really don't describe at all what's happening. And we really have to think in new terms of how these things work. And if we can start with that, we've probably overcome the biggest obstacle we face in really learning these skills. Now, I'm going to give you what I think is the critical movement, timing, and rhythm of lagging in a stroke. And I think there are two really, really dominant lags that we're going to look at. And a lag is really, it's a counter movement, it's a delay. So again, the end of the racket is going in one direction while the body is pushing force in another direction. So again, it's kind of a counter movement. Right? And again, a delay of the racket. Now, there's one significant delay right at the bottom. What we'll see is the butt of the racket turn towards the oncoming ball or towards the net. Okay? Now, that coincides with a push out towards the ball going out to the side. Right? So there's a lag right there. And again, I'm letting the racket actually kind of just stay in its backwards path. When I get here and I let the racket go back and down, I'm going to let this part go forward and up while the tip of the racket's still in its down and back phase. Okay, so that's one leg, and we get this weightlessness in the racket. The racket feels like it kind of disappears at that moment because I feel no force in it. Now, I bring it forward, and then there's another leg that's actually going to occur right on contact. I'm not going to try to whip the racket. I'm actually going to just let it die out, and then I'm going to push and turn the handle. All right, so what happens is I get this very fast movement right after the contact. But on the contact, there's actually a grip, there's touch, there's hold, there's drive, as I'm applying this forceful driving action and levering action out of the larger muscle groups. But at the same time, I've acquired touch with this soft coming in, the soft touch of the ball. And I've created drive because there's hold towards the target as I let the racket lag. Okay, so again, I want you to try to feel these two legs. Lag in, lag under, and lag on the ball. This is going to make the body much more dynamic. And when we see great speed in these strokes, again, we're captivated by the speed of the racket, and we just naturally assume that the racket's just going fast, fast, fast all the way through, and all we're trying to do is build up speed into the ball. It's not true. It just isn't true. We're also trying to create connection and drive, touch and drive, right? And so there is a lagging feel on the ball itself. Doesn't mean I'm just trying to stop the racket or that the racket does come to a complete stop. It just has, again, kind of this void, this feeling of disappearing. And I really feel the ball kind of sticking in the hand. And that's what creates this springing action, because I'm actually levering against the ball, coming out of the large muscle groups, and just boring into the ball and letting it spring out of the racket with the right response. So, I think if any of you have watched Federer warm up, you'll notice that he goes very, very slowly in kind of these lazy movements. It looks like he's totally disinterested, like he wants to be anywhere but the tennis court. Well, I can assure you he's totally focused on what he's doing. But what he's focused on is really these things that we're talking about. Feeling that move there, feeling that touch there, feeling the push and turn of the hips, the levering actions, again, all of these things, and doing it in such a flowing, relaxed way that he's really conscious of how these things work. He slows it down so he can really pay attention to it, doesn't get overwhelmed with the speed of things, is really trying to study this stuff and master it. All right, and so we see this also, of course, with short court. This is what players are trying to assure that they get these feels before they go out and just start hitting balls, that they get these rhythms and touches and so on going. Right? And so as we practice this, we can do this just with a drop hit, and I suggest you go very easy to start with. Again, I want you to feel, again, the wind-up, big in the shoulders, relaxed here, drop, coil. Now in the drop, see what makes the racket go back is not the racket, it's the arm going out. See, so I'm just going to drop the racket and it's going to go here, but as I start to push my arm this way, the racket now flexes back. So sometimes we'll see a player kind of pull back first. So they come here, they pull in this direction, so the racket's going back, down, and then the arm goes out that way. So again, we see the leg there, come to the ball, and we're pushing out, come to the ball, touch, and then let it lag again as I continue pushing out and over. So it's back, under and out and over. All right, so it's going to look something like that. Lag, lag, onto the ball. And I want to feel as though I'm holding that ball, and I can feel right here the contact and the hold and the target all at the same time. Okay. All right, now I'm going to go real slowly with it. right here. I want to feel the racket stop, and I want to feel how my body is going to push out against that ball by straightening up. And I'm going to push my hip into the ball, let my shoulder push and rotate. So my shoulder's rotated in and under, out and over. In and under, out and over. And right on the ball, I want to feel like the racket comes to a stop. So I'm actually going to try to find ways right now that I can get my racket to stop better on the ball. The way that I can do that is to create this lag closer to the ball. If I pull the butt of the racket forward a little closer to the ball, while the racket's still folding back, I don't give the racket a chance to bring in this forward, this hard, fast action forward against the ball. What I'm actually doing is essentially eliminating almost all of the forward swing. So now I just have kind of this levering action. And again, this is, we see players come in, it looks so fast, but what's actually happening is this is pulling forward to the ball, and then it actually stops and reverses. So it's not just a forward motion, it's a pull, a stop, and a reverse with a lever. And so now the racket really doesn't have all the speed that we think it does. It's a change in direction. In, jump, and I kind of let it hold right there. There's going to be a turn. And again, I can generate so much more power when I use leverage. I don't need a big swing, and I don't need a tremendous amount of racket head speed if I can generate leverage. I can get an incredibly quick motion with just a slight turn push. A lot of speed in there without a big swing, and this is what leverage is going to apply. And again, this is going to give me both touch, hold, and drive, because remember, they're one and the same thing. Okay, so we're going to go through that same process on the backhand side, and I'll try and take you kind of step by step on what I think you should be thinking of as we try to get this rhythm and these movements mastered. Okay, again, first, just you turn sideways. I'm going to do a one-hander. Okay, so I'm going to drop the ball, and as I drop, I'm going to bend into the ground and turn. The rackets, as I tilt down and into the court, my racket's going to naturally go up and back. So again, I'm just using the large muscle groups to control the movements of the other end, the tip of the racket. Come in. Now, I'm going to let the racket just drop. Just let everything fall. And as I feel the racket fall, before it's actually fallen all the way, I'm going to start moving my arm out to the left. So again, kind of a counter move. Now that's, again, going to fold the wrist back. I'm not consciously trying to snap my wrist back or trying to feel like I'm forcefully making the tip of the racket go back. All I'm doing is pushing my shoulder out, pushing my elbow, pushing my hand, and just letting this relax so I don't feel it. So remember, all these movements out here are passive. Okay, so once I get to that position, then what I'm going to do is apply a lever coming from my hips, my shoulder, the core of the body, by straightening. I'm actually going to pull my shoulders back a little bit, straighten my hips out, and I'm going to get a lever. Now I'm going to keep this real loose, and all I'm going to try to do is just absorb the ball with a slight turn. Now again, if we go back to that big ball, we remember that to move a ball efficiently is a turning action. It's not a hitting straight through. It doesn't move the ball well. I get much better hold on that ball if I can turn it, either side spin, underspin. In this case, we're going to show top spin. All right, so I come to it, and again, it's a vertical release. I straighten up. I don't turn into it. I don't turn through it. All I'm going to do is straighten out and up, right? And that's my lever. Right there is really applying a straightening action into these large muscle groups. All right, so it'll look like this. Straighten. Right, and in there, see, the racket is held so lightly, it's so passive, that when it meets the ball, I want to actually feel like the ball stops the racket right there. And then I'm applying force into the handle, Now again, by doing that, I'm going to get a momentary hold on that ball, and I'm going to feel that drive. If I'm just swinging, trying to either brush off of the ball too quickly, if I don't have that lag action, I just do this, I'm not going to feel that drive. I'm not going to feel that hold. If I swing into the ball too flat, I'm not going to feel that hold. All right, so again, it's getting these lags correct, learning the lever principles, how to coil in and create touch. You get those down. Again, it's not that difficult, but what's hard is to break through our impulses, what we think we have to do and what we've been told to do so long. Again, trying to get racket head speed, trying to hit through the ball. You'll never acquire what we see the pros doing if you follow that path. So again, take this slowly, work with the concepts, get the feels, you'll get it down. As I mentioned earlier, I think we approach the serve with a better principle. We have a better model in mind when we talk about throwing. We're already into a better path. Again, if we think of the throw, again, there is touch involved. The one thing is, on the serve, there's still some drive. So really, I like to think of it as just a totally vertical push upward forehand that's just oriented up into the sky. So if I look at how I get better at the forehand, it's really pushing across the back of the ball and just straightening the arm out with a turning action, again, using a lever. I want to get away from this idea of swinging through the ball. Okay? And this is exactly what we see the problem with on servers, is that they collapse. And that's really swinging through the ball. It's going to cause you to collapse. Because as you go forward, you go down. Again, it's all of this forward stuff that pulls me down, pulls me out of the hit. So we're going to try to fight that. I'm going to show you how to avoid, pulling out of the hit, pulling your head down, over-rotating, all those things that we know are wrong, but we can't change it because we don't have really the right instruction or the right model. All right, so if we think of the forehand as, again, kind of a push and turn, see, and I just want to feel how I just let this edge straighten out, pushing out to the right and just letting the edge of the racket and the racket square right there. This goes back to just this idea of just throwing the ball off of the racket. I just push and straighten the racket out. So when I come to this ball, I'm coiled under. See, if I just get that feel right there, that ball shoots. Again, that's leverage right there. Right, I'm going to try to do that same thing going straight up into the sky. Now, to get the right coil, see, on the forehand, we really should be using kind of more of a semi-western grip, or somewhere between semi-western and full eastern. Serve, we do something different. We go to a continental grip. Right, so that's a hammer type of grip. And if you just take the ball and just hit it on the edge like that, so you've got your continental grip. And again, what that's going to do is I start going up, and I want to feel like I'm just going to push straight on the back of the ball, upward on the back of the ball. But as I do that, I'm going to turn. I'm going to turn this straight, just like I push and just turn the racket straight. So I want to, again, apply that turning, straightening action out of the large muscle groups. Right? And I want to come in with leverage. So I want to really kind of get the ball stuck, and the racket itself kind of stuck in into the ball in a little bit of these wedged folds and kind of coils, and then straighten out on the ball. So I come in, and again I push up, and just try to turn the racket. And using the large muscle groups, I'm not trying to snap my wrist. The wrist is going to work. It's going to straighten out. But again, it's not a severe snapping action. It's just a natural kind of straightening action. Now come in and push up. And you see, as I get, you see better, at applying these large muscle levering actions, boom, this gets faster, stronger, and at the same time it's very passive, so I create that touch, still feel like I'm slinging the ball out of the racket. Not going to get as much hold on my faster actions, but I still want some hold on every stroke. I've got to have some touch, because remember, if I don't have touch, I don't have drive. All right, so really, if we just take these same ideas of just pushing and squaring, right? I think we apply that same motion in a very vertical upward action on the back of the ball, square up. You're going to feel that leverage action, just be, I think, totally shocked and totally pleased and elated with the results you're going to get. We're going to take a look at this forehand stroke from Novak Djokovic to see how he creates drive, and actually study, reinforce what we defined as the drive, so you have a much better idea of what this action entails. Now, Djokovic has, of course, a great forehand, but I think that one of the things that typifies it is it's very fluid. Also, he gets great spin and great hold on the ball. Like we were talking about, he really gets this look of the racket or the ball springing out of the racket. He kind of slings it out, really slings it out of his body. We're going to see how that happens. And of course, he starts with a nice coil. You can see the lift of the shoulders, rotation of the hips, get sideways. Now he's going to drop, and you can see right here this motion of coiling the racket. Now, we talked about the lag. This is the first lag right here. He just lets his wrist relax, and he pulls his right shoulder forward. He's actually going to pull back with his left shoulder to push his right shoulder forward. And with that, he's going to draw his elbow forward, and he's going to let his forearm shoulder rotate as he makes this motion, his right arm rotate, and let the racket just continue falling back. And that creates this position right here. Again, we'll take a look at that a couple times. Just lets the racket fall. Now he comes out at the ball, but again, the racket's still folding back. So the racket's just hasn't accepted that energy from the core yet. This is the whip-like action that we get out of the coiling movement. And so now as he comes to the ball, and he keeps coming forward to the ball with his rotation, his core. And again, as he meets the ball, you can see that the racket really isn't whipping forward. He's really just letting the racket coil, and he's letting his shoulders bring the racket forward. Now, this is kind of, he's cocked to the ball into here, and really still kind of coiling onto the ball. I don't see any action of the racket whipping forward, trying to speed the racket forward by using his wrist in any way. You see just the shoulders bring the racket against the ball. And as he meets the ball, you can see the racket's just slightly behind the hand and in kind of a levering action. And in this moment, the hand is still very relaxed, and I would say that he's accepting the energy of the ball with his hand. He's not trying to hit through it, just trying to meet it and just square up. Now comes, with the touch right here, is the drive. And if we look at just these moments, just right through here, going to go a little slower. He just comes in and touches, and now push. And we can see this movement isn't at all just a racket movement. He's not thinking racket head speed. Okay? What he's doing, you can see every single part of his body kind of working in a very synchronized way to create this upward push on the ball, but at the same time maintain perfect alignment to the target. So if he's thinking racket head speed, see that, then we would get something very, very different. He's actually letting the ball stop and using these counter big muscle groups to actually drive the racket in an upward release, upward push. So I think that's very clear that the racket hits this second lag right here and kind of stays very passive right there. As you can see, He's pushing forward with the right hip. He's pushing back with his right foot. He's pushing back with his pushing back with his left shoulder, pushing forward with his right shoulder. So again, there's these counter movements and movements that create this levered drive. It's really based on connection to the ball. And he really digs into the ball like he would just bury a shovel into the dirt and just lever from the other end to create a very forceful, much more efficient action. Now here he just pushes out and just lets it relax and comes and lets his body come back to just a balanced position at the end where he's just recovering. In, drive, and recover. So again, this is a very different concept. We see that he achieves this drive by coming in with the coils. He comes into the ball at an angle. He keeps his hand relaxed by utilizing these lagging movements. And he's able to connect to the ball with touch and also create drive by levering from the large muscle groups while he keeps the hand, the racket, very stable on the squaring up moment right into contact. So again, keep these concepts in mind. Do your best to practice these. Again, you're going to have much, much more success and just have that great feel of actually holding the ball, feeling the contact, feeling the target, and being able to release great power with great confidence.